Every controversial or legendary judgment today comes with one common but magical phrase: constitutional morality. Judges invoke it, politicians quote it, and activists have weaponized it. But here is the problem: most people cannot understand the term properly, let alone define it clearly. Almost nobody explains concept, context, and the scope of constitutional morality. So today I'll answer four questions in neat and clean manner. First, what is constitutional morality? Why India needs it? How and when courts use it? And the most important of all, can constitutional morality override the will of the people forever? सरल भाषा में कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोरालिटी का मतलब है बीइंग फेथफुल टू द कोर वैल्यूज ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन even when those values are unpopular, politically costly, or even emotionally uncomfortable for the people of the country. Let me give you an example. Due process of law is emotionally costly for public because public wants fast punishment, but courts are very slow. Bulldozer justice is preferred over procedural justice. Another example, suppose majority wants कि किसी एक कम्युनिटी को जॉब्स, हाउसिंग या अदर बेनिफिट्स ना मिले. अगर कोई पॉलिटिकल लीडर उस टाइम पर कहता है कि एवरीबडी इज इक्वल एंड मेजॉरिटी के ओपिनियन को इग्नोर कर दिया जाता है, देन द पर्सन विल नॉट गेट वोट्स. इस केस में लीडर ने कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोरालिटी को अपहेल्ड किया, बट he will definitely lose the seat. So, constitutional morality is not personal or religious morality or social traditions, majority sentiments, etc. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar once said that a constitution will fail if the people who operate it lack constitutional morality. In practice, it means rule of law should prevail and not the rule of mob, because popularity does not mean constitutionality. Now, another important question: why India needs this doctrine? See, India is not a simple democracy. It is deeply unequal society with historical caste hierarchies, religious minorities, and vulnerable minorities, with heavy emotional and identity-driven politics. A lot of past trauma is there in this country. I'm sure you remember that slavery was once legal and popular, untouchability was socially accepted and even appreciated. In fact, discrimination was sanctioned by majority support. So, constitutional morality acts like a safety valve to protect minorities, to preserve liberty, and to prevent tyranny of the majority. That's why judiciary often repeats that democracy is not just about numbers, it is also about values. Without constitutional morality, parliament could easily and legally dilute rights, government can justify discrimination, and the constitution would become symbolic, not supreme. Now let's understand how and when courts use constitutional morality. Basically, there are three situations. First, when a law violates individual dignity. Even if the law is popular, still majority support cannot justify humiliation or exclusion. For example, at one point in time, manual scavenging in India was a legal provision. Dalits were forced to clean human waste by hand under this law. Even the local governments defended it as a necessary work. Now the second situation, when tradition clashes with fundamental rights. Courts often ask, is this tradition constitutional or just old? Because age does not mean legitimacy. Something might have been right probably 500 years ago, but not anymore. For example, Supreme Courts stand on triple talaq or women's entry in Sabrimala temple. Now the third situation when constitutional morality can be invoked is when the state fails to protect liberty. Courts step in to enforce constitutional promises that governments are unwilling or afraid to uphold. For example, Section 377 of IPC criminalized consensual same-sex relationships. The law was colonial, outdated, and violated personal liberty. Yet for decades, governments refused to repeal it because they feared public backlash and kept hiding behind public morality. Government inaction was deliberate, not accidental. Parliament knew the injustice but chose silence. The Supreme Court of India said, history owes an apology to the LGBT community. Section 377 was decriminalized and it was put on record that public morality cannot override constitutional morality. Now let's talk about the real problem. Constitutional morality sounds powerful, but it has a fatal flaw. It is not clearly defined in the Constitution. So there is no fixed test, no objective checklist, no written boundary, which may create three serious dangers. First, judicial subjectivity. When one judge calls constitutional morality, another judge may completely reject it. Again, the law becomes personality driven. Second problem is that political parties invoke it for political selectivity. When a judgment supports their ideology, they call it constitutional morality. But when a judgment is not in their favor, they call it personal morality. So constitutional morality is praised when useful, attacked when inconvenient. And the biggest problem is that every disagreement can be framed as anti-constitution. Democracy survives on disagreement. When disagreement is branded as unconstitutional, debate dies, fear grows, and institutions gradually lose legitimacy. Now let's come to the heart of controversy: popular will versus constitutional values. Popular will comes from elections based on numbers and it changes every 5 years. Constitutional values come from the Constitution. They are stable and designed to restrain power and not to chase votes. Now, the irony is that popular will can be wrong. History is flooded with examples to prove it. For example, Sri Lankan civil war crisis, Hitler's Germany, and what is happening in Bangladesh right now. But at the same time, courts cannot permanently override society and popular will, because if courts rely only on constitutional morality without social legitimacy, they will definitely face public backlash, institutional distrust, and democratic alienation. That's why this doctrine must be used carefully and sparingly, and not as a permanent shortcut. So, what should be the limits of constitutional morality? Constitutional morality must be used to protect fundamental rights, to check majoritarian access, and definitely to uphold dignity and liberty of individuals. But it must not replace Parliament permanently. Judges are also human beings. We cannot consider them flawless and beyond political or personal bias. Courts cannot govern society endlessly. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was clear that courts cannot substitute social reform forever. So, think of constitutional morality as a bridge, not as a destination. Constitutional morality must exist to protect democracy and not to replace it. If you found some value in the content, please like it, share it with your colleagues, and subscribe to the channel.